Commander Vex Tai stood frozen at the observation deck of the Galactic Defense Station, his four eyes locked onto the tactical display showing the dreaded red zones of the galaxy. These crimson markers represented the Death Worlds, planets so hostile that even the most advanced civilizations avoided them entirely. The Zephyrian commander's scaled hands trembled as he processed the latest intelligence report. "Sir, the humans are requesting permission to establish colonies on Kepler 442b, announced Lieutenant Kixra, her voice carrying the universal tone of disbelief that had become common when discussing human activities. Vex Tai's mandibles clicked nervously. Kepler 442b was classified as a class the Death World, featuring atmospheric storms that could strip flesh from bone, gravity 3 times standard galactic norm, and surface temperatures that fluctuated between boiling and freezing within hours. The planet had claimed 17 different survey expeditions over the past millennium, including elite teams from the mighty Draconian Empire and the technologically superior Cetacean Collective. "They cannot be serious," Vex Tai muttered, his translator struggling with the concept. "Even our most advanced environmental suits fail within minutes on that nightmare sphere." The lieutenant's tentacles writhed with anxiety as she continued reading the human request. "Sir, they're not requesting environmental protection protocols. They want to establish what they call vacation resorts on the planet's most hostile continent." Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place in every major civilization's command centers. The humans, a relatively new species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago, were systematically requesting colonization rights to every Death World in known space. What made this phenomenon truly terrifying to the established galactic powers was not just the audacity of these requests, but the fact that preliminary scouting reports suggested humans were actually succeeding. On the neutral trading station of Nexus Prime, Captain Zorith of the Crystalline Hierarchy found himself in an emergency session with representatives from 12 different species. The topic of discussion had become increasingly common: the human problem. "They've established successful colonies on 18 Death Worlds in the past 6 months, reported Ambassador Thralnas of the Silicon Confederacy, his mineral-based form sparkling with agitation. "Worlds that we've classified as uninhabitable for over 1,000 years. The holographic display showed a map of human expansion, with green dots marking their colonies scattered across what had previously been considered the galaxy's dead zones. Each green dot represented what should have been impossible, thriving human settlements on planets that killed everything else. On Proxima Centauri C, they've built what they call extreme sports facilities," continued Thralnas, his voice processing unit struggling with the translation. "The radiation levels there would kill a draconian in hours, yet humans are using the environment for recreational activities." Captain Zorith's crystalline structure resonated with worry. The crystalline hierarchy had evolved on one of the most stable and comfortable worlds in the galaxy, with perfect atmospheric conditions and abundant resources. The very concept of voluntarily exposing oneself to lethal environments was beyond comprehension. "What kind of species develops recreational activities in radiation fields?" Zorith asked, though he expected no answer. The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Every species represented in the room had evolved survival instincts that drove them away from danger. The fundamental principle of galactic civilization was the pursuit of safety, comfort, and stability. Entire wars had been fought over planets with slightly better atmospheric conditions or marginally more abundant resources. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the human ambassador, sat quietly in the corner of the meeting room, observing the growing panic among the other species. She was a small woman by human standards, standing barely 5.5 feet tall, with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes that spoke of decades spent smiling. To the assembled aliens, she appeared deceptively fragile. Ambassador Vasquez, Captain Zorith addressed her directly, his tone carrying a mixture of confusion and barely contained fear. Perhaps you could explain your species' apparent disregard for basic survival protocols? Elena stood slowly, her movements calm and measured. She had attended dozens of similar meetings over the past months, and the routine had become familiar. Fear, confusion, and ultimately the dawning realization that humanity operated under completely different principles than the rest of galactic civilization. "Captain Zorith, esteemed representatives," Elena began, her voice carrying the casual confidence that so unnerved other species. "I think there might be a fundamental misunderstanding about human nature and our relationship with challenging environments." She activated her personal holographic projector, displaying images of Earth. The assembled aliens leaned forward, studying humanity's home world with intense curiosity. They had heard rumors about the planet's hostile nature, but seeing it displayed so casually was deeply unsettling. "This is Earth, our home world," Elena continued. "By galactic standards, it would be classified as a Class 7 death world. We have massive storms that can level entire cities, tectonic activity that regularly reshape continents, temperature variations that span over 100 degrees, and weather patterns that can shift from deadly heat to killing cold within hours." Ambassador Thralness's mineral structure cracked slightly with shock. "You evolved on a death world?" "Not just evolved," Elena replied with what humans would recognize as a gentle smile, but which appeared predatory to most alien sensibilities. "We thrived. We turned those challenges into advantages. Our storms provided energy. Our unstable geography created diverse ecosystems, and our variable climate taught us adaptability." She advanced to the next image, showing human cities built into cliff faces, underwater colonies, and settlements that appeared to be constructed directly into active volcanic regions. "What you call extreme environments, we call Tuesday," Elena continued. "On Earth, we have people who voluntarily jump out of aircraft for entertainment, dive to crushing ocean depths for recreation, and climb mountains where the air is too thin to breathe just because they enjoy the challenge." The silence that followed was profound. In 3,000 years of galactic civilization, no species had ever described potentially lethal activities as entertainment. Lieutenant Kixra, who had been monitoring communications, suddenly straightened in alarm. "Commander Vexatai, we're receiving a transmission from the Kepler 442b system. It's from the human colony ship that was supposed to arrive there today." Vexatai's scales rippled with dread. The ship had been given permission to attempt landing, mostly because the Galactic Council assumed it would be destroyed within hours, serving as a harsh lesson about the realities of Death World colonization. No one expected to actually receive a transmission. "Put it through," Vextai ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. The main display flickered to life, showing the interior of what appeared to be a human command center. But something was wrong with the image. Everything seemed to be shaking violently, and in the background, the sound of howling winds and crashing debris created a constant din. "Galactic Defense Station, this is Colonel Sarah Chen aboard the colony ship New Frontier," came a cheerful human voice that seemed completely at odds with the chaos visible in the background. "Just wanted to check in and confirm our successful landing on Kepler 442b. Vextai stared at the screen in disbelief. Through the viewports behind the human colonel, he could see the raging atmospheric storms that had destroyed every previous expedition to the planet. Lightning that could power small cities crackled continuously across a sky the color of dried blood, while winds that registered at over 300 kilometers per hour bent massive rock formations like grass. "Colonel Chen," Vextai managed to stammer, "are you experiencing equipment failure? Your environmental readings appear to indicate you're in the middle of a catastrophic storm event." Colonel Chen glanced over her shoulder at the chaos outside, and then looked back at the camera with what humans would recognize as mild amusement. "Oh, that's just the local weather," she replied casually. "It's actually quite beautiful once you get used to it. The lightning displays are spectacular, and the wind patterns create these amazing natural formations. We've already identified several locations that would be perfect for storm surfing facilities." "Storm surfing!" Lieutenant Kixra whispered in horror. "It's like regular surfing, but you use the wind patterns during atmospheric disturbances instead of water waves," Chen explained helpfully. "The gravity differential on this planet makes it possible to achieve some incredible aerial maneuvers. We're thinking of hosting the first Galactic Extreme Sports Championship here next year." The transmission continued for several more minutes, with Colonel Chen enthusiastically describing plans for volcano diving, gravity racing, and something called tornado wrestling, while seemingly oblivious to the fact that she was casually discussing recreational activities in conditions that would kill most galactic citizens instantly. When the transmission finally ended, the command center remained silent for several long minutes. Vextai found himself staring at the tactical display, where the red marker for Kepler 442b had automatically shifted to green, indicating successful human colonization. "Sir," Lieutenant Kixra said quietly, "we're receiving similar reports from 17 other human colony missions, all successful landings on Class X and above Death worlds." Vextai's 4 eyes moved slowly across the tactical display, watching as red markers systematically changed to green. Each transformation represented something that should have been impossible, humans not just surviving on Death worlds, but apparently enjoying themselves. "Lieutenant," Vextai said slowly, his voice carrying a new tone of realization, "send a priority message to High Command. Recommend immediate reclassification of humanity's threat assessment level." "Sir, from what level to what level?" Vextai was quiet for a long moment, watching the expanding green dots that marked human colonies spreading across what had been the galaxy's forbidden zones. "From unknown primitive species to species of extreme concern," he finally replied. "Any civilization that considers Class Thauthene Death worlds suitable for vacation resorts is not operating under normal biological or psychological parameters." As reports continued flooding in from across the galaxy, a pattern began to emerge that would reshape every species' understanding of survival, adaptation, and the fundamental nature of life itself. The humans weren't just surviving on Death worlds, they were transforming them into recreational paradises, creating thriving colonies in conditions that challenged the very definition of habitability. In the depths of space, on worlds where other species feared to tread, humans were building cities, raising families, and pursuing what they casually referred to as adventure tourism. Each successful colony represented not just a victory over hostile environments, but a fundamental challenge to everything the galactic community thought they knew about the limits of biological adaptation. The age of human expansion had begun, and the established order of galactic civilization would never be the same. As Vextai watched the tactical display update with yet another successful human colony, one thought echoed through his mind with crystalline clarity. If these beings could turn Death worlds into playgrounds, what else might they be capable of? The question would haunt him, and every other military commander in the galaxy, in the months to come. 6 months after the first human colonies had been established on Death worlds, Admiral Kethvar of the Draconian Empire found himself aboard his flagship, studying reconnaissance footage that challenged every military doctrine his species had developed over 5 millennia of galactic warfare. The massive view screen displayed real-time surveillance of the human colony on Hellscape 7th, a world so hostile that the Draconians had used it as an execution site for their worst criminals. The planet featured surface temperatures that exceeded molten metal, atmospheric composition that dissolved most known materials on contact, and seismic activity so violent that the ground literally shifted every few minutes. Yet there, clearly visible in the footage, were humans building what appeared to be permanent structures, not emergency shelters or temporary research stations, but actual cities with parks, recreational facilities, and what the human colonists had cheerfully described in their communications as lava-boarding tracks. Admiral, the humans on Hellscape 7 are requesting permission to host something called a music festival, reported Commander Drexel, his massive draconian frame trembling with confusion. They want to invite guests from across the galaxy to join them for what they describe as the ultimate death metal concert experience. Admiral Kethvar's scaled lips curled back in what might have been a smile if it weren't so filled with existential dread. The Draconian Empire had built its reputation on being the galaxy's fiercest warriors, capable of surviving in conditions that would kill lesser species. Their home world was classified as a Class 4 hostile environment, featuring harsh desert conditions and predatory fauna that had forged the Draconians into the galaxy's premier military force. The idea that another species could not only survive, but actively seek entertainment on worlds far more hostile than anything in Draconian space was fundamentally threatening to their entire cultural identity. "Show me the detailed surveillance reports," Kethvar ordered. The footage shifted to closer views of human activities on various death worlds. On Frostbite Prime, where temperatures never rose above -200 degrees Celsius, humans had constructed what appeared to be ice palaces and were engaging in activities that involved deliberately exposing themselves to the killing cold while making sounds their translators interpreted as laughter. On Acidfall Beta, where the rain was composed of corrosive chemicals that could dissolve starship hulls, humans had built elaborate collection systems and were apparently using the deadly precipitation to power their cities while children played in specially designed, acid-proof playgrounds. "Admiral," Commander Drexel continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, "on Volcanic Nightmare 9, they've established something called a summer camp for their offspring. They're voluntarily sending their young into conditions that would kill our most elite warriors." The surveillance footage showed human children, barely older than hatchlings, swimming in pools heated by volcanic vents, climbing rock faces while lava flowed beneath them, and engaging in group activities that involved deliberately triggering controlled avalanches for what appeared to be recreational purposes. Admiral Kethvar felt something he had never experienced in 3 centuries of military service: genuine fear of another species' casual capabilities. Meanwhile, on the research vessel Scientific Endeavor, Dr. Yilmoth of the Cerebral Collective was conducting the most comprehensive study of human behavior ever attempted by galactic civilization. The Cerebrals were known throughout the galaxy for their analytical capabilities and rational approach to all problems, but the human phenomenon had pushed their understanding to its limits. Research log, day 184. Dr. Yilmoth spoke into his recording device, his tentacles moving in patterns that indicated deep confusion. Subject species continues to demonstrate behavioral patterns that contradict every established model of survival-driven evolution. He activated a holographic display showing human colonies scattered across dozens of death worlds, each one thriving in conditions that should have resulted in immediate extinction. On Radiation Storm 7, humans have established what they call a tanning resort, he continued. They are voluntarily exposing themselves to levels of cosmic radiation that would sterilize most known life forms, and they describe this as relaxing. The biological mechanisms that allow this behavior remain completely unknown. Dr. Yilmoth adjusted his equipment to show thermal imaging of human activities. Most disturbing is their apparent ability to adapt their baseline physiology in real time. Humans on high-gravity worlds show increased muscle density within weeks. Those on cold worlds demonstrate improved circulation efficiency, and those on high-radiation worlds appear to develop natural resistance to cellular damage. He paused, his multiple brains processing the implications. This suggests either an unprecedented level of biological adaptability or the presence of enhancement technology so advanced that our scanners cannot detect it. Neither possibility is comforting. The recording was interrupted by an urgent communication from his research assistant. Dr. Yilmoth, we're receiving a transmission from the human colony on Nightmare Swamp Prime. They're inviting us to attend something called a barbecue party. Dr. Yilmoth's eye stalks writhed with confusion. Nightmare Swamp Prime was a world where the very atmosphere was toxic to most life forms. The ground was composed of acidic mud that could dissolve metal, and the native life forms were predatory creatures the size of starships that had evolved to hunt anything that moved. They want us to visit for recreational purposes, he asked. Apparently so, sir. They mentioned something about grilling fresh local cuisine and swamp boating through the monster habitats. On the trade station Nexus Prime, the emergency council meeting had become a permanent fixture. Representatives from every major civilization gathered daily to share increasingly disturbing reports about human expansion and activities. The humans on Plasma Storm 6 have established what they call a university, reported Counselor Vixera of the Aquatic Alliance, her gills fluttering with distress. They're sending their young there to study what they describe as extreme environmental sciences, while living in conditions that would vaporize most organic matter. The holographic display showed human students casually walking between buildings while plasma storms raged overhead, the deadly energy discharges apparently being channeled into their educational facilities as a power source. On Gravity Well 3, where the gravitational forces are so intense that our ships require special shielding just to maintain orbit, humans have built what they call an amusement park, added Representative Quintal of the Gas Giant Federation. They're using the crushing gravitational fields as entertainment devices. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat at the human representative table, reviewing the daily reports from human colonies with what other species were beginning to recognize as the terrifying casualness that characterized all human responses to mortal danger. Ambassador, Captain Zorith addressed her directly, his crystalline structure resonating with barely controlled panic. Your species has established colonies on 47 death worlds in 6 months. At this rate, you will have claimed every uninhabitable planet in the galaxy within 5 years. What are your intentions? Elena looked up from her reports, genuinely surprised by the question. Our intentions? We're just looking for nice places to live and raise our families. These worlds offer excellent opportunities for personal growth, character development, and really spectacular views. Personal growth? Counselor Vixara's voice cracked. On worlds that kill everything that approaches them? Well, yes, Elena replied, her tone suggesting she was explaining something obvious to children. How can you really test your capabilities if you're always comfortable? Our children need challenges to develop properly. Safe environments are fine for retirement communities, but young people need adventure. She activated her personal display, showing images of human families enjoying various activities on death worlds. Children building sand castles on beaches where the sand was composed of crystallized poison. Families having picnics while hurricanes raged around protective barriers that seemed impossibly fragile, and teenagers engaged in what appeared to be competitive sports involving active volcanism. We've found that death worlds offer the perfect combination of challenge and beauty, Elena continued. The more hostile the environment, the more spectacular the natural phenomena. Our children are learning geology by surfing lava flows, studying atmospheric sciences by playing in acid storms, and developing physical fitness by competing in high-gravity sports leagues. The assembled aliens stared at the images in horror. What the humans described as educational experiences and childhood development activities looked like elaborate torture devices designed by the most creative sadists in galactic history. But what about safety? Representative Quintal asked desperately. Oh, we take extensive safety precautions, Elena assured him. All our children wear protective gear when they go swimming in the acid lakes, and we never let anyone under 16 participate in volcano diving without proper supervision. The casual mention of protective gear for acid lake swimming and age restrictions for volcano diving sent ripples of panic through the assembled representatives. The implications were staggering. Humans had normalized activities so dangerous that other species couldn't even comprehend them as possibilities. Back on Kepler 442b, Colonel Sarah Chen was conducting a video tour for a delegation of Galactic Council observers who had finally worked up the courage to visit a human Death World colony, albeit through remote drones rather than risking personal attendance. "And this is our main residential district," Chen announced cheerfully, as her camera swept across a collection of structures that appeared to be built directly into cliff faces while exposed to constant lightning strikes and hurricane-force winds. "The natural lightning provides most of our power needs, and the constant wind patterns create excellent natural air conditioning," she explained. "The children especially love playing in the electromagnetic fields during storm season." Through their remote drones, the observers watched human children engaged in activities that involved deliberately attracting lightning strikes while wearing what appeared to be minimal protective equipment, laughing and competing to see who could maintain contact with the electrical discharges the longest. "Colonel Chen," came the trembling voice of Observer Prexnal, "are those children intentionally channeling lethal electrical current through their bodies?" "Oh, that's just junior storm dancing," Chen replied casually. "It's great exercise and really helps develop their electrical resistance. By the time they're teenagers, most of our kids can handle direct lightning strikes without any equipment at all." She moved the camera to show the colony's industrial district, where humans were operating heavy machinery in conditions that required their workers to be constantly protected from crushing atmospheric pressure, corrosive chemicals, and temperature fluctuations that would crack most materials. "We've had amazing success with our manufacturing operations," Chen continued. "The extreme conditions here allow us to produce materials with properties we never achieved on Earth. The constant stress testing from the environment creates incredibly durable products." The tour continued for another hour, with Colonel Chen enthusiastically describing recreational facilities that sounded like death traps, educational programs that resembled military torture techniques, and residential amenities that were indistinguishable from weapons systems. When the tour finally ended, the observer team sat in stunned silence aboard their survey ship, safely positioned several light minutes away from the death world they had just witnessed humans treating as a suburban neighborhood. "Observer log. Supplemental," Prexnal spoke into his recording device, his voice barely above a whisper. "Human colonization patterns suggest a complete redefinition of the concept of habitable space. What we have classified as death worlds, they treat as desirable real estate. What we consider lethal environmental hazards, they use as recreational equipment." He paused, staring at the distant planet where humans were apparently raising families in conditions that would challenge the survival capabilities of the galaxy's most advanced automated systems. "Recommendation for Galactic Council: immediate revision of threat assessment protocols. Any species capable of casual survival in Class Tontas Death World conditions should be considered a potential existential threat to galactic civilization, not through malicious intent, but through their apparent ability to thrive in any conceivable environment." As reports continued flooding in from across the galaxy, a new reality began to take shape in the minds of every species in galactic civilization. The humans weren't just expanding into uninhabitable worlds, they were transforming the very concept of what constituted a suitable living environment. Each successful human colony represented not just survival against impossible odds, but the casual creation of thriving communities in conditions that challenged the fundamental assumptions about life, adaptation, and the limits of biological possibility. The galaxy was witnessing the emergence of a species that didn't just survive in hostile environments, they flourished in them, found joy in them, and raised their children to see mortal danger as recreational opportunity. And perhaps most terrifying of all, they seemed to be just getting started. 1 year after the first human Death World colonies had been established, the Galactic Council convened for the most critical emergency session in recorded history. The vast amphitheater on the neutral world of Concordia was filled with representatives from every known civilization, their varied forms united only by the expressions of barely controlled panic that seemed universal across species lines. High Chancellor Morden of the Ancient Assembly called the session to order with trembling appendages. The Ancient Assembly had overseen galactic civilization for over 10,000 years, guiding younger species through the careful expansion into safe, habitable worlds. Nothing in their extensive experience had prepared them for the crisis they now faced. "Esteemed beings of the galaxy," Morden began, his voice amplified across the chamber, "we gather today to address what can only be described as a fundamental challenge to the natural order of existence itself." The massive holographic display activated, showing a real-time map of human expansion across the galaxy. What had begun as a handful of green dots marking impossible colonies had grown into a vast network of thriving human settlements, each one located on worlds that had been considered utterly uninhabitable for millennia. In 12 months, the human species has established successful colonies on 137 death worlds, Morden continued, his voice growing shakier with each word. They have not merely survived in these locations, they have transformed them into what they describe as paradise vacation destinations. The display zoomed in on specific examples, each one more horrifying than the last to the assembled alien delegates. On Corrosive Nightmare 9, humans had built floating cities that used the planet's acid storms as both power sources and water features for elaborate fountain displays. On Crushing Death 7, where the gravity was 15 times galactic standard, humans had established what they called gravity sports leagues, where their children competed in activities that would flatten most known life forms into molecular paste. Commander Vextai rose from his seat in the military advisory section. His scaled form had become noticeably thinner over the past months as stress had taken its toll on his ability to process food. "High Chancellor, permission to present the latest intelligence reports from our deep space monitoring stations." "Granted, Commander." Vextai activated his personal display, showing surveillance footage from the human colony on Absolute Zero Prime, a world where temperatures never rose above the point where most matter ceased to exist in liquid form. The humans on Absolute Zero Prime have established what they call an ice sculpture festival, Vextai reported, his voice hollow with disbelief. They are using the naturally occurring crystallized atmospheric gases as artistic materials while working in environmental conditions that would freeze our most advanced equipment solid in seconds. The footage showed human artists casually working in the open atmosphere of the frozen death world, their breath visible as they laughed and collaborated on massive sculptures carved from materials that existed only in the most extreme cold conditions known to science. "But this is not the most disturbing development," Vextai continued. 3 days ago, we received a transmission from the human colony on Plasma Hell 40. The display shifted to show a world that existed in a constant state of stellar bombardment, where the surface was perpetually scoured by solar radiation intense enough to vaporize spacecraft. It was a world so hostile that even automated probes lasted only minutes before being destroyed. "The humans on Plasma Hell 40 have invited the Galactic Council to attend the first interstellar beach volleyball tournament," Vextai announced, his voice cracking with strain. "They have somehow created recreational beaches on a world where the sand is composed of ionized stellar matter." The assembled delegates erupted in sounds of distress that transcended species barriers. Clicking, whistling, roaring, and harmonizing combined into a symphony of existential terror. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood slowly from the human delegation section. Over the past year, her appearance had changed subtly. Her graying hair had been bleached white by exposure to various exotic radiations during colony visits. Her skin had developed a slight luminescent quality from time spent in high-energy environments, and her eyes held a depth that spoke of having witnessed wonders that existed beyond the comprehension of most galactic civilization. "Honorable Chancellor, distinguished delegates," Elena began, her voice carrying the same casual confidence that had become humanity's trademark in the face of cosmic horror. "I believe there may still be some fundamental misunderstandings about human motivations and capabilities." She activated her own holographic display, showing recent footage from human colonies that depicted scenes that challenged the sanity of observers. Children playing games that involved riding creatures made of living lightning on worlds where the atmosphere was composed of exotic matter. Teenagers competing in sports that required them to navigate through fields of miniature black holes while maintaining conversation with their teammates. Families enjoying picnics on worlds where the ground was composed of crystallized time, and the sky rained diamonds harder than starship hulls. Over the past year, we've received thousands of applications from human families wanting to relocate to death worlds, Elena continued. We actually have waiting lists for our most challenging colonies. Parents compete to get their children enrolled in schools on the most hostile worlds because they believe it builds character. Ambassador Thralnas of the Silicon Confederacy managed to find his voice. "Ambassador Vasquez, your species has children voluntarily attending educational institutions on worlds where the local physics would disintegrate our most advanced artificial intelligences. How is this possible?" "Education through experience," Elena replied with a smile that had become legendary for its ability to induce panic in alien observers. "You can't really understand exotic matter physics until you've played catch with a ball made of strange quarks. You can't appreciate the beauty of stellar formation until you've gone camping in a nebula where new stars are being born around your tent." She advanced to the next image, showing a group of human teenagers engaged in what appeared to be a competitive sport that involved deliberately diving into the event horizon of microscopic black holes and using the gravitational effects to perform acrobatic maneuvers. "Our young people especially love the challenges these environments provide," Elena continued. "Last month, we had to implement age restrictions for singularity diving because some of our 8-year-olds were getting too competitive and attempting maneuvers that bent space-time in ways that made their parents nervous." The casualness with which she described activities that violated multiple laws of physics and common sense sent ripples of horror through the assembly. Age restrictions for singularity diving implied not just that humans could survive such activities, but that they had enough participants to require regulation. High Chancellor Morden raised a trembling appendage. "Ambassador, surely there must be some limits to your species' environmental tolerances. Some conditions under which even humans would not attempt to establish colonies?" Elena paused thoughtfully, consulting her personal data device. "Well, we did receive a proposal last week for a colony on the surface of a neutron star, but we decided that might be a bit too ambitious for our current technology level. We're planning to revisit that possibility once our materials science advances a bit further." The fact that humans considered neutron star colonization merely premature rather than impossible sent shockwaves through the assembly. Several delegates required medical attention as their physiologies couldn't process the implications. "However," Elena continued cheerfully, "we are moving forward with plans for our first colony inside a gas giant's metallic hydrogen core. The pressure differential should provide excellent conditions for materials research, and the electromagnetic environment will be perfect for our children's science fair projects." Dr. Yilmoth of the Cerebral Collective, whose extensive research into human behavior had driven him to the brink of intellectual breakdown, stood with visible effort. His tentacles moved in patterns that his species associated with profound philosophical crisis. "Ambassador Vasquez," he began, his voice processing units struggling with concepts that challenged the foundations of rational thought. "My research indicates that human colonies are not simply surviving in hostile environments. They are actively terraforming death worlds into increasingly dangerous configurations." Elena nodded approvingly. "Oh yes, we've found that most death worlds aren't quite challenging enough in their natural state. We've been making improvements to enhance the experience for our residents." The display showed before and after images of human colonies. The before images depicted worlds that were already classified as utterly uninhabitable by galactic standards. The after images showed the same worlds enhanced with additional hazards that humans had apparently installed for recreational purposes. On Lavastorm Prime, humans had redirected volcanic flows to create what they called extreme sledding courses. On Ice Death 7th, they had artificially increased the atmospheric pressure and introduced predatory creatures from other death worlds to create what they described as a more engaging hunting experience. On Radiation Nightmare 13, they had constructed facilities that concentrated the existing cosmic radiation into focused beams that their children used for games that resembled laser tag, but with energies capable of sterilizing small moons. "We've found that our colonists really appreciate when we provide additional challenges," Elena explained. "Comfortable environments make people soft, but when you have to adapt to new dangers regularly, it keeps everyone sharp and healthy." Admiral Kethvar of the Draconian Empire rose from his seat, his massive form trembling with something that might have been rage if it weren't so thoroughly mixed with terror. The Draconians had built their entire cultural identity around being the galaxy's ultimate warriors, but the human reports had systematically destroyed every assumption about what constituted military-grade toughness. "Ambassador," Kethvar growled, his voice carrying undertones that had intimidated species across half the galaxy. "Your children's science fair projects involve experimental manipulation of forces that our most advanced weapons systems cannot safely contain. Your recreational activities exceed the environmental tolerances of our elite military units. What does your species consider actual military training?" Elena's expression brightened with enthusiasm. "Oh, we don't really have military training in the traditional sense. Our approach to defense is more about making potential enemies think twice before bothering us." She activated a new display showing human defensive installations on their Death World colonies. What appeared on screen defied conventional understanding of both military architecture and survival instincts. "Our planetary defenses are designed to demonstrate that anyone who attacks our colonies would have to survive the same conditions our families live in for recreation," Elena explained. "Most potential invaders realize they can't conquer worlds they can't survive visiting." The display showed defensive systems that weaponized the hostile environments humans had chosen to call home. Automated systems that could focus stellar radiation into beams capable of cracking planets, gravity manipulators that could create localized black holes, and atmospheric processors that could generate storms that would strip the atmosphere from attacking fleets. "The beauty of living on death worlds is that the planets themselves become our defensive systems," Elena continued. "Who's going to attack a world where the local weather patterns can disintegrate battleships?" Commander Vexatai found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Ambassador, are you saying that your species chooses to live in these conditions partly for military purposes?" "Oh, no," Elena replied, seeming genuinely confused by the question. "We live there because we enjoy it. The defensive benefits are just a pleasant side effect." The casual dismissal of military advantages that would transform the galactic balance of power sent the assembly into chaos. Representatives from dozens of species began speaking simultaneously in voices that ranged from panic to hysteria. High Chancellor Mordun called for order, but his own voice carried a tremor that had never been heard before in the ancient amphitheater. When relative quiet finally returned, he addressed Elena directly. "Ambassador Vasquez, I must ask directly. What are your species' ultimate intentions regarding galactic expansion?" Elena consulted her data device again, scrolling through what appeared to be extensive colony development plans. "Well, we're hoping to establish thriving communities on every interesting world in the galaxy within the next decade. We're particularly excited about some of the more exotic locations we've identified. There's a world near the galactic core where space and time exist in separate layers, and another one where the local physics allow matter to exist in 17 different states simultaneously." She paused, looking up at the assembled delegates with the expression of someone sharing exciting vacation plans with friends. "We're also very interested in interdimensional colonies. There are some lovely universes where the basic constants of physics are different enough to provide really unique living experiences." The implications hit the assembly like a physical blow. Not only were humans expanding throughout normal space, but they were apparently considering colonization across multiple dimensions and realities. "Of course," Elena added cheerfully, "we're hoping to invite other species to join us as we expand. There's no reason everyone can't learn to appreciate the beauty and excitement of really challenging environments. We'd be happy to help other civilizations develop the skills needed to enjoy Death-world living." The offer, made with genuine friendliness and enthusiasm, was perhaps the most terrifying statement ever made in the Galactic Council chamber. The possibility of humans actively spreading their impossible environmental tolerances to other species represented a fundamental threat to the established order of existence. As the session continued into emergency closed deliberations, one fact became clear to every delegate present. Humanity had not simply achieved the impossible by colonizing death worlds. They had redefined the very concept of what was possible, turning the galaxy's most hostile environments into recreational paradises and raising their children to see cosmic horror as casual entertainment. The age of careful, conservative expansion into safe, habitable worlds was ending. In its place, humanity was ushering in an era where any environment, no matter how deadly, could potentially become home to thriving civilizations who viewed mortal danger as an interesting design challenge. And perhaps most terrifying of all, they genuinely seemed to want to share this new perspective with everyone else. Convinced that once other species learned to appreciate the beauty of impossible survival, the entire galaxy would be a much more interesting and exciting place to live. As the emergency session concluded with no resolution, beyond a shared sense of existential dread, one thought echoed through the minds of every delegate. If humans could turn death worlds into playgrounds, what would they do with the rest of the universe? The question would haunt galactic civilization for generations to come, as humanity continued its relentless expansion into every environment that should have killed them, transforming each one into proof that the word impossible had lost all meaning in the age of human exploration. The galaxy would never be the same, and perhaps more importantly, it would never be boring again.